Well, I want to welcome all the residents here to the Eye on Piscataway show. We're very fortunate enough to have our longtime standing congressman who represents Piscataway and a good chunk of Middlesex County, Congressman Frank Pallone, who is actually not in studio, but with the wonders of technology now, via Zoom, with the taping, with all of our volunteers in the background helping out, and the congressman happens to be in Washington. So Congressman Pallone, we're going to get right to the meat. Obviously, over the last 3 weeks or longer, months since President Trump has been inaugurated, there's a lot of whirlwind policy shifts that have happened nationally. And a lot that have potentially impacting Middlesex County residents and Piscataway residents as a whole. Do you want to walk us through some of the implications? I know front and center this week is the potential Medicaid cuts, where last week the budget was a continuing resolution was adopted by both the House and Senate and signed by the president. But the problem is I guess it has a very broad impact that's going to happen on the residents, which I don't think a lot of members of the general public understand what may or may not happen to them. So I'll let you take it away, and I'll interject some questions here and there. Go ahead, Congressman.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for having me on the show. The biggest concern that I have right now is with regard to health care. I think you know that in the last 20 years or so, we've expanded health care insurance, if you will, for so many people. We had Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. We've expanded Medicaid to cover people to the point where, we were like maybe 95% of Americans had some kind of health insurance between what they would get on the job, if they had it on the job, between the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid, and of course Medicare. But what the Republicans are proposing to do in order to pay for this big tax cut for mainly large corporations and the very wealthy, really billionaires, is make major cuts in our healthcare program, particularly in Medicaid. And my committee, the Energy and Commerce Committee, where I'm the ranking Democrat, the lead Democrat, has been instructed by this budget resolution, which all the Republicans voted for but one, to basically cut almost $1 trillion for programs within our jurisdiction that we cover in our committee. And that's going to be mostly Medicaid. You're going to hear from some of the Republicans who are going to say, oh, it's not going to be Medicaid, but we just got a response to our letter from the Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan. And they said that if you're talking about that level of cuts, almost $1 trillion, probably only maybe 1/10 of it would not be healthcare oriented. It would have to come from Medicare or Medicaid. And I think the Republicans, still don't want to touch Medicare, so they're going to take it out of Medicaid. And I don't want to, like a lot of people say, well, what do I care? Well, Medicaid covers so many things. I mean, 60% of nursing home care is paid for by Medicaid. Something like 30-40% of the children are in the state of New Jersey are covered by Medicaid. Most people that have people with disabilities get some kind of help from Medicaid. So if the state, the governor was talking when he did his budget message a couple of weeks ago, he basically said that, you're talking maybe about as much as $10 billion in cuts to Medicaid over 10 years. And the state cannot absorb those kinds of cuts, with this budget, within its budget. And so that means a lot of people will lose health insurance, or the services that are provided in places like nursing homes or hospitals will simply be cut back. And a lot of those costs will be pushed on to people's health insurance or co-pays, and all those things will go up. So I don't want to paint, I sound like doomsday here, but it is a major concern, Mayor, to be honest.
Well, rightfully so. So if you look at the news clips and some of the statements from some of the Republican members of Congress and the president, they wanted to instruct your committee that you sit on to come up with those cuts, as you just said. But all outside analysis, not just the Congressional Budget Office, but outside analysis, foundations, everything, there's no theoretical way that those cuts, if they were to happen, would not impact, it would impact Medicaid and Medicare.
Yeah,
100%.
like people will say to me, well, how do hospitals get cut? Well, keep in mind that a hospital, I mean, we can use maybe a JFK, which is not far from you,
Yeah.
right? JFK, anybody that goes there, if they have health insurance, that pays for most of the cost, right? If they don't have health insurance, it becomes what we call uncompensated care, which is either paid for, which for the most part, the hospital ends up eating, right? It goes into debt. And so if you have a lot more people that come there that have no insurance because they don't have Medicaid, and they're not getting, paid by the insurance, then what are their choices? They cut back services, they charge more to the insurance company, insurance rates go up, or they increase, insurance companies increase co-pays. As you know, as the mayor, the money doesn't grow on a tree. I mean, everything has to be paid for in some way, and this is the problem.
Well, there was also a news article in today's statewide newspaper about how Hackensack Meridian and the Robert Wood Johnson network would take more than $1 billion hit next year if these were to go through. And that will filter down into services. There's no way around it. And as you said before, members of the state legislature that sit on the budget committees and the appropriations committee basically say there's no way in heck that the state can absorb that hit, which means I think what they're going to try to do, and you probably know a little better, is that they're going to shove it off on the state saying, well, we didn't cut it. It's up to the states that if they want to maintain it at the current level, they're going to have to make up the lost revenue from the cuts.
Exactly. And you were talking about Robert Wood Johnson. We were actually at the Children's Specialized Hospital at Robert Wood Johnson in New Brunswick, I think last week or the week before, and we were talking about a cut there for Medicaid of something between $40 and $50 million just for Children's Specialized Hospital. See, what happens with Medicaid is that it's a federal state share, right? So the basic Medicaid program in New Jersey is paid for 50% by the state, 50% by the federal government. But then there's the expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act that's 90% paid for by the federal government. So what we're hearing is the Republicans want to reduce the federal share. So they might say, instead of paying 90% for expanded, we'll pay 70%. Or instead of paying 50% for regular Medicaid, we'll pay 40%. And then, they'll say, well, that's, you just have to make up the difference. But there's no way for the state to do that. I mean, I think the governor's budget was like, 50 something billion when he had his budget message a couple of weeks ago. And you're talking about $1 billion each year because this is a 10-year program. There's no way to make up for that. You'd have to either raise taxes, which you're not going to do, or you cut services, or you throw people off health insurance so they don't have it anymore. That's the problem.
And I want to delve into that for a minute about people being eliminated from throwing them off of the health care. So the whole idea is when the Affordable Care Act was put in, and you were front and center with designing that, was to get more people primary care help so it would bring down the overall cost of health care nationally, which would make it affordable, which would also, the hospital network system would also have consistency in billing and staffing and things like that. But when you take the Medicaid equation out now or make a substantial hit on that system, doesn't that throw the whole healthcare system for the last 15 years out of whack?
Sure. I mean, basically what we've done is, a lot of Medicaid is based, not all, a lot of it is based on your income, right? So when I say basic Medicaid, and I'm not giving you accurate figures right now, but let's say for a family of four, you would have been eligible for basic Medicaid if you were making like $25,000 a year, right? It might be a little higher than that, but probably not. And then if you under expanded Medicaid, we raised that to maybe $35,000, right? And so when the state gets the cut from the federal government, what do? Well, they're probably going to have to reduce who's eligible. So they might say, well, we can't afford expanded Medicaid, so that's out, right? And that could be, millions of people nationwide. Who knows how many in New Jersey? So all these things add up. And after a while, people don't have health insurance. Or let's use the nursing home example, right? One of the things the Republicans are talking about, Brian, is that they say, well, we'll get rid of the nurse staffing ratio, right? So right now, you have to have so many nurses per patient and a nurse there 24 hours, right? So if you got rid of that, then you would say to the nursing homes, oh, well, you don't have to have a nurse on staff. You don't have to have so many nurses or health aides per patient, right? And I think that's estimated that could save about $25 billion a year out of this trillion. It's really nothing. But that means that you have, inferior services. I've been around, I remember in the 70s, I'm showing my age now, when we had really bad nursing, we had fires, we had health and safety problems. For the most part, nursing homes have improved quite a bit because we've put in nurse staffing ratios, we have better fire safety codes. But you could easily go back if you don't give them the reimbursement rate that they have, and you say, well, you don't have to do all these things to save money. These are the kinds of problems.
One of the things I want to delve just very briefly into the politics of this. And there was a large analysis from the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal about the congressional districts nationally that have the amount of residents populous each congressional district that have Medicaid and Medicare recipients. And if you look through that, almost in the top 50, 40 of them are represented by Republican members of Congress, which is ironic. And like here in the state of New Jersey, down in Cape May County, where Congressman Van Drew, a colleague of yours, almost half the residents of that county are on Medicaid. So
Right.
how can you, I'm just trying to, I don't have a degree in mathematics, but, I do know how to balance a checkbook in government service. If you make a substantial cut at the federal level of what they're doing, obviously there's going to be a boatload of people that are going to be impacted.
Absolutely. And again, a lot of these federal dollars go to the states based on how wealthy, if you will, where the states are, right? Or the congressional districts. So as you say, generally speaking, the rural areas of the country.
We're talking about the Mississippis, the Alabamas,
That's correct.
Kentucky, Western Tennessee, that
Or the
whole
southern part of New
swath
Jersey.
area, parts of Missouri, that whole area, the Appalachia region, it's all, almost every congressional district, it's like anywhere from 40 to 50% of the residents.
Right. There's one congressional district in California, farm country near Fresno. I don't know if that's the Imperial Valley.
It's almost 75% of the people are on Medicaid.
Yeah, it's up to almost 70%.
Yeah.
And it's because rural areas tend to be poorer, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the rural hospitals are the more likely to close. Like, you're not going to see JFK or Robert Wood Johnson close, but those services will be less, right? But in a lot of these rural areas, the hospitals will literally close because they're in such a low margin.
Well, the other impact is that in more rural regions of the country, you also have urgent care type facilities that are not a full-blown hospital, but they're acting as a hospital, but because of the distance people have to go. Yep. My take is I think they're all going to be set because a lot of these companies, they're basing revenue, probably 60% of their revenue to keep those facilities operating or in the tank.
We have in New Jersey and throughout the country what we call federally qualified health centers. They're not hospitals, they're health centers, community-based health centers. There's one Chandler Pavilion in New Brunswick. There's one Central State in Perth Amboy. There's one in Long Branch, Monmouth Family Care. These are in my district. And there where people can go, it's not urgent care because it's financed by the federal government. Right. But again, even though community health centers are financed by the federal government, they depend on health insurance to pay the bill, third-party reimbursement, as we say. So if you cut Medicaid, then they don't have the money, and you'll see a lot of them close as well, or have fewer services. So a lot of the community health centers in the last few years, if you go, for example, to Chandler or the one in Perth Amboy, have expanded into dental care, women's health care, mental health care, and instead of getting bigger and having more services, they'll have fewer and fewer. That's the problem there too.
So you touched very briefly on the nursing home aspect. The demographics and the population, obviously, we're all getting older. And that's going to be more of a problematic issue as time goes on with the aging population. So what happens nationally if you have substantial cutbacks in potential nursing home care when you're going to have overflow? Where do people go? What do families do? What do they do with their loved
A
ones?
lot of them are going to end up having to stay home. Now, for example, people don't realize it. Again, only your first month of nursing home care is paid for by Medicare, right?
Yeah,
After that, they have what they call spend down, which is an awful thing.
yeah.
I wish I would like to get rid of it. Where after the first month, if you're there on, under Medicare, then you have to spend your assets. There's certain things that they exclude, like your home, right? That they'll take your retirement, they'll take your Social Security, any other assets you have other than your home, they will take and in order to pay for the nursing home care. And then when you have no assets left, then you go on Medicaid. So 60% of the people in nursing homes today in our state, and it's pretty much true nationally, are being paid for by Medicaid. And people don't realize it. And I hate when people have to spend down their assets too. But this is what we require. What we really should do is have Medicare cover all nursing home care. But I've had bills in the past that would accomplish that, but we haven't been able to get them passed. So this is the problem. People don't realize that Medicaid pays for most of the nursing home care, and then the reimbursement rate. One of the things that the state would probably do is reduce the reimbursement rate, and then you have fewer services, and you start having all the health and safety problems that I mentioned before. God forbid, but that's what happens.
And as you said before, this is not a theoretical tabletop exercise. The vote actually happened. And then now your committee is supposed to come up with some ideas, which is going to be very interesting with the dollar number that they said through the House Budget Committee in the Senate to come up with those
Right.
cuts.
Right now, what we're asking people to do is to contact, you can no use contacting me, but
Yeah.
contact, the Republicans if they're in those districts. In New Jersey, we have three: Tom Kaine,
And
Jeff
Representative
Andrews,
Smith and Van Drew.
Smith, and because remember the majority in the House is only three, right? So even if those three ended up voting against this, it wouldn't pass, right? And as you mentioned, there's a lot of Republicans in rural areas who probably don't want to vote for this either because it's even more dire for them. So we are making a major campaign asking Republicans not to support this. It's hard to know when this is going to happen because the budget resolution passed in the House, but the budget resolution in the Senate is nothing like it. So it may, part of the effort too is to try to get the senators not to adopt a budget resolution similar to the House that makes all these cuts. But again, our two senators are with us. They didn't vote for these cuts. So I can't really ask anybody in New Jersey to contact their senator because Senator Kim is actually having town meetings all over the state on this topic, and of course Cori Bush, also is with us. But we'll see what happens. I mean, it's very possible that this process begins in the next few weeks, and it's not good.
So we spoke at length about the Medicaid issue, which is from your jurisdiction on the committee that you serve on. What are some of the other broad impacts that are going to happen by the budget that was passed by the House Republicans that have large implications on residents here in New Jersey?
Well, one of the things, I have to stress that the only reason this is happening is because the Republicans want to extend their tax plan that they adopted when Trump was president for the first 4 years, and which had major cuts for the very wealthy. I'm not talking about, upper income people, the very wealthy billionaires, as well as the large corporations. It reduced the tax rates for them, right? And that expires this year, at the end of this year. So they have to come up with a way of continuing that. But so, like the Ways and Means Committee, which is the tax committee, has been instructed to do these tax cuts, right? We've been instructed to pay for it. This is kind of sad, right?
That's the ironic part. They want to pay for the tax cuts out of taking the hide out of the Medicaid
Right,
budget.
right. So if you're on the Ways and Means Committee, all you're doing is voting for tax cuts, you know. So you
Yeah.
might say, "Oh, that's great," you know. But the point is that these tax cuts are not for the middle class. So, you know, if you were going to do a tax cut, Brian, I obviously wouldn't pay for it with Medicaid cuts, but you know you could do a nice tax cut for middle class people that would actually cost less money.
Yeah.
And you know one of the issues, of course, is salt, because if you remember when Trump and the Republicans did this tax cut, when he
December
was
of 2017, Congressman, I
yeah,
remember
yeah,
it very
that's when they
well.
put a cap
Yeah.
on salt at $10,000, and it really hurt New Jerseyans because a lot of people that are middle class end up paying more than 10,000 between their property taxes, and sales taxes, and other taxes, and of course every year, you know, that gets worse, right? So I mean, there's so many ways that you could change this tax code to be more helpful to the average American, rather than just, you know, reduce corporate taxes for the large corporations, which is what this does.
And we're gonna continue along that line about salt. I had to laugh when the president signed that the first time in his first administration back in December of 2017. My office got a call from a reporter from Politico about commenting how it's going to impact towns. I said, "Oh, you mean this Screw New Jersey law?" And that was the headline of their nationally: screw New Jersey, New York, California, and Maryland. But
Right.
with that being said, we're already a donor state. We're subsidizing a lot of these other states around the
Right.
country, and the fact that the House Republicans on the Ways and Means Committee want to continue that, and that's why I think they sunsetted it, you know, to have it be renewed. But what I don't understand, how do you get to wipe off? I mean, I'm not an accountant, but I do know they're trying to claim that the 3 trillion dollars in tax breaks that they give in 2017 now. Oh, since they're tax breaks now, they shouldn't be included in the accounting methodology
Yeah,
in this
significant.
debate right now.
Right, right. And, you know, again, um, if you really wanted to give a tax cut to the middle class, you could reduce the rates for people of, you know, middle income, right, rather than the corporate tax rate. They've got all kinds of gimmicks where they assume certain things. I don't know exactly what it is. I can't get into it, but you know, they assume certain things for accounting purposes as a way of saving money. The other thing you have to understand too is that this tax cut, its actual cost is $4.5 trillion, right?
And the ironic part is, Congressman, I think a lot of them who were still in Congress at the time when Joe Biden became president, they were all screaming and yelling about the Deficit Reduction Act, about the cost of it. But at least in that case, that was passed, you actually saw some return. You know, you saw things being built. You saw manufacturing versus this, you know, what didn't happen the first go around in 2017.
Right, and I don't know how, you know, if you want to get into that, but what I was going to say is that this $4.5 trillion cost for this tax cut for the wealthy and corporate interests mostly is being paid for on the arm through debt, through increased debt, right? The cuts that we're talking about with Medicaid and some other things that we haven't gotten into don't pay for the whole thing. Most of it is still going further into debt, which Republicans always say they don't want to go into debt, but they never hesitate to go into debt to give tax cuts to, you know, to the wealthy and to corporate interests. But you're now getting into another thing that Trump's doing, and maybe you want to get into that a little bit, is that I'm just really afraid that his policies are, you know, you can always already see the beginnings of it, could lead to a recession, right? Because what is he doing? He's cutting jobs in so many federal agencies. He's he's freezing dollars, right? A lot of it is for research dollars. And you have Rutgers University at the Bush campus, a lot of the research.
That has we're very worried here because of the broad
Right,
impact
right.
of the Piscataway, New Brunswick
A
area.
lot of the research that's being cut is the medical research, scientific research, which a lot of that is done. If you remember, one of the things that really drove me crazy, and it was reversed, thankfully, because we complained, was at the Bush campus, you have the clinic for the 9/11 first responders, right? Yeah, and I've been there several times. They had cut the staff there 20%. And then we got a bunch of Republicans and Democrats to write and say, this is outrageous. You can't cut funding for the people that, first responders at the World Trade Center. And within a few days, it was reversed. So I use that not because it's Piscataway per se, but because it shows that if there is a public outcry, you can get Trump to change his mind, which is, of course, what we're trying to do here. So that's a good example of where they made these cuts, which came from Musk, and the response was bipartisan.
And we'll get to him in a minute.
And so they killed it. But, so if you start, getting rid of all the infrastructure projects, you start freezing the funding, and then you cut so many employees, and then you put up these tariffs, including the main target, which I don't understand, seems to be Canada and Mexico, our neighbors, right? This leads to economic downturn. People don't want to invest. And, for the last few weeks, I don't know what happened yesterday, but the market was going up and down, up and down. Not that the stock market is the main thing to show where the economy is going, but there've been a lot of indications of an economic downturn. A lot of it is fueled because of these policies. You started out talking about Trump policies, and these are some of the policies that I think are very dangerous for the economy.
Well, we're out here at the Walton Building on Old New Brunswick Road with Dara, the new owner of Be Healthy Personal Trainers here that are at the ribbon cutting here today. So, Dara, why don't you tell us a little bit about your company?
Awesome. Hi, everyone. So I'm the owner of Be Healthy Personal Trainer. We've been in business actually since 2016 and have been in the Walton building since 2018, but have recently expanded to the 4th floor. We are a post-rehab personal training business. However, we also see general fitness as well. Come in and find out what we're all about. We also have on staff a certified physical therapy dog. Come here. So this is Olivia.
Olivia gets paid with biscuits.
Olivia, she was certified by the Bright and Beautiful. Just a little shout out, really great national organization that puts dogs in schools and hospitals and in places like this and helps those in need. Please, 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 there's a need for more therapy dogs out there. Please get everybody some more help. It's the best thing you can do for society, guys.
Right, thanks, Darren. I'm also Councilwoman Carmichael. Would you like to help? And ready? We'll give us the cue. Olivia's giving us the cue. Give us on 3 barks, Olivia. 1, 2, 3. Congratulations.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, we're out here on Stelton Road at Kids Gym. Basically, it's a new business that's opening up, and we're here with the owner, Victoria Rodriguez. Victoria, you want to tell a little bit about this company?
Sure. So, just good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this special ribbon cutting ceremony. Also, we're honored to have Mayor the mayor here of Piscataway. We're so thrilled to celebrate this milestone with all of you and our valued community partners, friends, and family. We Rock the Spectrum. We're dedicated to welcoming all children into a judge-free, safe zone where we play with a purpose. This ribbon cutting marks the official opening of our location, our new location in Piscataway. We're excited to serve you. We envision We Rock the Spectrum as a place where we're able to exercise and stimulate our senses through positive physical, emotional, and social development. We would like to thank our incredible team, my employees, my friends and family who have worked tirelessly to make this day a reality. I want to express my gratitude to Real Development for being instrumental in this project. We're grateful for the support of the community, and we're excited to be here in Piscataway. We're committed to being responsible, engaged member of the community, and we look forward to serving you. We're excited to open our doors, and we can't wait to see you all here.
Okay.
We're so happy to have you.
Boy, that was a long speech there, Victoria. But that's great, and we also have Councilwoman Lombardi, this is her award that's here, and I'd like to thank your grandparents for coming in today. So, thank you. So Rama, do you want to help cut the ribbon? And give you some good luck. Here, hold on. You know how to operate scissors? I'm sure you do.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, there you go.
Try.
Remember, these are the real McCoy.
Oh, these are the
okay,
real.
we'll count on 3. 1, 2, 3. There you
Hey,
go.
look at
I brought a book about dragons love tacos. So the author is Adam Rubin and Daniel Salmere. Why are your dragon friends crying? They look so sad. Oh my, we got to do something about this. Listen to me, dragons don't freak out. Heck, everyone loves tacos, and it shows the whole community out looking at the taco trees. Thank you. It's not too early to start thinking about a career path. Just think about keeping local government in mind, whether you're here living in Piscataway or if you move to a different community, because there will be a shortage of folks working in local government over the next 20 years. And I want you to start thinking about that as a career path.
Did you ever think about running for president?
No, I need the hair on my head. It's the presidency is a very, very hard job. Same member of Congress. I enjoy being the mayor of our community. It's a town I was born and raised in. I feel I can get a lot more things done that I love to do, like fixing parks, recreational programs, fixing all the roads in town, making things safe for our community.
What was your greatest accomplishment?
I think one of them is getting the community center finally built, because when I go over to that building and I see the smiles of people of all ages, of all demographics, that really makes me happy to see that. And it happens every day.
What are we saying?
Thank you!
I appreciate it. I happened to be with the mayor of Winnipeg, Canada, a couple of weeks ago, and he was making a pitch to a lot of the mayors nationally, you know, the broad implications of the whole trade tariffs and everything, how it's going to seriously hurt both countries in the jobs.
Yeah, and I mean, I've never been an advocate for free trade agreements because I always worried that, NAFTA, for example, did not have adequate protections for labor, for the environment. I don't have a problem renegotiating some of these free trade agreements so they're more protective of American jobs, right? And protective of the environment and health and safety. But you just can't, this is like, it's not even rational. He just decides one day we're going to have a 25% tariff on everything from Canada. And then the next 2 days later lifts it and then puts it back again. Now I think he's talking about putting back again April 1st or something like that. It's just erratic, not rational behavior. And that's what's causing the markets and so many people to lose confidence in the business climate, like if you're going to build, let's say you have to build an apartment complex, right? Or a subdivision of houses, right? And all of a sudden, you know that you're getting your lumber from Canada, and now there's going to be a 25% tariff on it, you're reluctant to make that investment because that's a big part of your cost. And it's not like it's 5%, it's 25%, right? And I don't know what the theory is. I really don't understand what he's up to.
Well, I think the concern, Congressman, is that you're going to see broad implications at the street level. But you notice now there's been a lot of pushback from the business community and from small business owners about the broad implications, because am I going to be able to afford to keep people on staff? Do I have to cut jobs because this, that, and the other thing? So this is really serious stuff here. This is not like somebody blustering. You have companies now that are hedging their bets and starting to lay people off, even though these tariffs, some may or may not have gone into effect, but the fact that they might, they can't wait to if they did, because they got to, they're running a business. You can't,
Exactly.
You need some certainty here. And, it's not that easy.
And it's true for everything, right? I mean, it's true for a hospital, it's true for a business. I don't understand why President Trump is creating all this economic uncertainty. I don't see how that's helpful to anyone. I really don't. I watch it and I'm like, every day back and forth, back and forth. Jobs are frozen, then people are put back. You know what?
Let's delve a little about this Elon Musk nonsense that's going on. It seems absolutely crazy that this gentleman, who's supposedly working for the president, but as a private citizen, can swoop in and get all personal data at all these different agencies and departments tied in with the federal government that sometimes even members of Congress don't have access to, or other folks that work high up in those departments don't have access to. And then they put it on zip drives. And where's this information going? What are they doing with it? Is it going to foreign adversaries? Nobody seems to know what is going on.
Right, and let's face it. I mean, most of what Musk does is illegal.
Yeah.
I mean, unconstitutional, illegal, and we haven't gotten into that. And a lot of these things have been reversed by the courts because they are illegal. And but this idea of just setting up this, sort of quasi-private agency, Doge, that's just going to go in and decide on a given day, we're going to come here, we're going to look at your papers, we're going to look at all your privacy information. We have very strict laws that protect privacy, and all of a sudden, all those records, whether it's your health records, your financial records, are all now given over to him. And young people in some cases who don't have any experience in protecting security. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but there's been some pushback even from some of the other cabinet members who've had these raids by Doge. The woman who's in charge, I should remember her name now. She was a member of Congress who they put in charge of national security. She's been pushing back because she's worried about the national security implications of some of this, right? We don't know this material. I don't want to be like a conspiracy guy here, Brian, but Russia, China, they're all out trying to get all our information.
Listen, there's a market for a wealth of information on key citizens of our country. Our foreign adversaries would probably pay a boatload of money to get a hold of that information. And this is really a national security issue.
It really is.
It's not a political, it's a national security issue.
Right. And so many of the things that Musk does are just blatantly illegal. I forget, what was it, the Agency for Peace? I never even heard of this. It was a...
Supposedly they raided it. It has nothing to do with the government.
Agency for Peace or something that was set up, I guess, partially funded maybe by the State Department, that they raided the other day. And, they're not even government employees. They're paid for by the private sector. And, I'm sure that's going to be overturned. But in the meantime, he's in there looking at everybody's records, I don't know why an agency for peace is such a bad thing. I mean, Trump keeps talking about peace, and then they're getting rid of the agency for peace. I mean, look, again, I'm not that familiar with this agency, so I don't know. But it sounds like it's a good thing.
I want to speak to you quickly about one of the things that are being floated in order to pay for these tax cuts. I know one of the things the U.S. Conference of Mayors is concerned about, as well as county officials, is about possibly eliminating the tax-free municipal bonds. And that would be devastating nationally, because 80% of the infrastructure work that's done in our country happens at the local level. It's not so much the state DOTs or the federal highway administration. It's really the locals. And if they eliminate that, then a lot of these public infrastructure projects, whether it's water, sewer, or roadways, will probably be shelved because they wouldn't be able to financially afford to do that.
Yeah, and I don't know, when you mentioned that earlier, I don't know what the status of that is, but I know it's a disaster. Because as you know, look, when you're doing major infrastructure projects in Piscataway, they can't be financed just with the annual budget, right? They have to be to bond for
You have
them.
to bond. You have to bond out for it because it's long-term investment.
And a lot of people aren't aware of that, but it's a fact. I mean, most capital projects in a town or state are done that way. And if you start this, taxing it, I mean, it's a disaster. Now, I haven't heard that that's happening or that is being taken seriously.
But here's part of the problem, Congressman. If your committee can't come up with the $1 trillion worth of cuts, they're going to look. The Ways and Means Committee is going to look for another venue. So
yeah, they'll look for another way to pay for it. Exactly. Yeah. Or put more of it on the arm. In which case, you pay your kids and grandchildren pay for it. I don't know.
So I noticed in the paper, because of the way, maybe you could explain briefly about, the difference between actually adopting a budget versus the continuing resolution, where I guess a lot of the towns and cities that you represent, you were able to get some funding for them, but now I guess that's going to go away or will not be acted upon because of what the Republicans did.
Right. In other words, but again, this is a little bureaucratic, but I'll try to explain it. So,
but even though Congressman, the reason I'm bringing this up though, but for the general public, they have to understand the implications of what just happened.
Right. So last week, all the discussion was about the annual spending bill. I won't call it the budget. But you could call it that, but I'll call it the annual spending bill. What you and I have been talking about with Medicaid is basically a 10-year program to either cut taxes or raise money by cutting Medicaid to pay for the taxes, right? That's over 10 years, and it's called a budget reconciliation. I can't believe I'm even using that term, but that's what we've been talking about so far. But there's an annual appropriation or spending bill, just like the state or like you have it in Piscataway every year that you have to adopt. And that is what that's what was adopted last week. Now, what happened there is that because the Republicans did not want to do the regular process, where they just do a budget and they pass it, they did, when they came in after his inauguration, a short-term spending bill. Like they just continued the spending from last year at the same level. And then what they adopted last week was to continue that through the end of the fiscal year, which is October. So now we're operating on a spending bill for annually, right, which is the same level of spending for most cases that we had last year. Now that, as you know, if you did that in Piscataway every year, you'd have major shortfalls in funding for a lot of your activities because of inflation. You can't just keep spending the same money this year as you did last year. But what I want to stress was that isn't exactly what happened. And there were many cases, particularly with some of the healthcare initiatives, where they actually went further back and they used figures from the previous year for the continuing resolution.
So they weren't using 2025 numbers; they weren't using 23 and 24 numbers.
Exactly. So they weren't. It wasn't just inflation that wasn't accounted for. It was actually
so there was actually substantially more cuts in the supplemental appropriation. In this continuing resolution.
And some of the biggest ones again were in healthcare. Right? So community health centers were in that category. Teaching health centers, special programs for diabetes, programs that trained doctors, all these things, the ones I just mentioned actually went back to the previous year, right? But even if you don't use those and you just use the ones that, use this year, it was a major problem because, for example, every year we give doctors a higher reimbursement rate for Medicare. Now, we haven't talked much about Medicare, right? Because it looks like the Republicans don't want to touch that and cut that. But they did not increase the Medicare reimbursement rate for doctors. And, more and more doctors don't take Medicare. A lot of doctors
That's
don't
right,
take
because
Medicare.
they can't financially afford to.
Right. Now, you might say, oh, the poor doctors, who cares? Why are we going to give them more money? And, you can take that position. But remember, they don't have to take you. And you may find that your doctor just says, look, I'm not taking Medicaid anymore. I'm not taking Medicare. And, it has implications.
So I've spoken with a lot of mayors nationally. I know we were talking about the community projects there that have gone away. Here locally, I know our museum director was very concerned because there was massive cuts from Doge. So now there's nobody there at the agencies to get reimbursed from the work that we already did right now. And I am concerned because we're in the process of finishing up our the largest solar project in the state of New Jersey right now. As a matter of fact, the cranes were out here yesterday at the studio bringing in all the things that we're supposed to be reimbursed by $5 million in change through the tax credits come July. And I'm concerned that they're going to get rid of the tax credits, and here we'll have a $5 million hole in the project.
Well, we could talk about this forever too, but let me just start out by saying, you said I was in Washington, but actually I'm in my Monmouth County office in Long Beach.
Oh, okay, all right.
And if you notice on the wall behind me, there's all these historical prints from the days when the presidents in the 19th century summered here. So we have a place in Long Beach called the Church of the Seven Presidents, where seven presidents worshiped in the 19th century, and it's being restored using your museum in Piscataway as the example. So when I went, what is it called? I should know.
The Mettler Bodine House.
Mettler Bodine House. I went there and I talked to the architects and saw what they were doing. And I said, oh, we have to do that here in Long Branch. And the same architectural firm that you use is now doing the one in Long Branch. But let's get into I just want you to say how Piscataway is an example for the rest of the congressional district. I have to mention that. But what you're right. So what happened was this annual spending bill eliminated all of the community projects that have been proposed for this fiscal year. Now that's not true for the Church of the Presidents or your Mettler Bodine, because that was the previous year, so they haven't been eliminated. But I know that a lot of them are having trouble because of all the people that have been laid off.
The personnel cuts.
That haven't been able to access in some ways the money. Now I've been told, last week we worked on this after we found out that the projects for this year were going to be eliminated. I said, well, what about last year's? And, they promised me, if it's worth anything, that they're now going to start, hiring people and, get people to get the money out for the projects that were approved in previous years. So hopefully we won't have a problem with previous year's funding.
Well,
this year's funding was eliminated.
There's a thought process out there. The reason why the president and Elon Musk through Doge is doing this, that if you eliminate the employees that supervise a lot of these programs, then you would be saving government money because nobody would be able to submit anything in to get reimbursed.
Right, but that's a hell of a way to operate,
Yes. We could never operate that way in Piscataway Township.
No, can you imagine if you did that?
They would be storming town hall and wanting to burn me at the stake if that would happen.
Right. So there's some, maybe that is what they have in mind. I don't know. But all I'm saying is that, I know people, a lot of people say, well, we shouldn't be spending money. We certainly don't need waste and fraud and abuse. I mean, I agree with that. But if you have to understand that, and you understand that if you really cut back on all these infrastructure projects and you eliminate so much of the workforce and you put up all these tariffs, it has a negative impact on the economy. And it's already happening, Brian.
Well, I spoke with the mayor from out in Minnesota. Evidently, the state DOT state of Minnesota got a directive from Federal Highway Administration that all their MPOs, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organizations that govern a lot of the states, that they were to stop spending any money until there could be a review. Well, if you're starting projects that are under mid-construction for review, that means the contractors are going to walk off. They're going to ask for penalties, and they may not restart the projects. And then you're going to have projects that are, whatever the 10, 20, 30% underway, and then, then you wonder why the general public gets upset at government.
Yeah, but Mayor, that's not what Doge and Elon Musk are doing. In other words, let's go back to Medicaid. Some of the, Elon Musk actually said, oh, there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid. We got to cut it out, right? But if you wanted to do that, let's use Medicaid as an example. You would have investigators go out and see if a doctor or a hospital was committing a fraud or waste or abuse, right?
That's why you have inspector generals.
Right, and he fired most of them.
Yeah.
All of them, I think. Then you would say, okay, you're cut off, right? Or maybe even bring criminal charges against them if it's a criminal. But that's not what they're doing. They're just saying, okay, we're going to cut Medicaid across the board from 90% to 80%. That doesn't deal with the fraud and abuse problem. That just reduces services and closes hospitals and facilities. So they're not being honest, and Musk is not being honest about what he's doing when he says, he was talking last week about Social Security, and so now we're all worried that he's going to try to cut Social Security, right? He said, oh, there's Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. We can cut all Social Security and it's not going to impact people. But that's not what they do. They're not looking to investigate fraudulent. They just want to make cuts across the board, and part of it is because they know that like if you look at the federal government, I don't want to talk. I use the term entitlement programs, and people say, "What does that mean?" Well, those are mandatory programs that are based on your income. So you pay into Social Security, and then you're entitled to it, so to speak, at a certain age. So that's why they call it an entitlement, right? That's where the big money is, right? In other words, the big money is not in the EPA, the lab, or
no, it's those programs, and then the Department of Defense.
Right, because those are the programs that people have been paying into for Medicare. They pay FICA for Social Security for years, and then they expect that at a certain age they're going to get a certain amount of money. They're entitled to it, so to speak. I don't like the term, but that's the way it is. And Musk knows that Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security are where the big bucks are. And if you want to start using that money for tax cuts or for corporations, you've got to go to those funds in order to come up with it, unless you're just going to go into debt again, So I don't know, maybe we're repeating ourselves.
Hey, Congressman, I did notice that there were several Republican members of Congress that actually sent a letter to Speaker Johnson about the energy efficiency program and some of the part of the Deficit Reduction Act that was passed and signed into law by President Biden about a lot of the renewables, that they don't want the tax credits to be eliminated because now they're seeing that it's creating a lot of jobs and infrastructure within their own communities.
Sure. It's the very same thing like healthcare. In other words, if you look at the programs under the Inflation Reduction Act or the bipartisan infrastructure law that encourage renewables or encourage electric vehicles, provided rebates, most of the it's the red states, right? It's the plain states, Texas, Oklahoma, the Dakotas, where a lot of these windmills are. We keep talking about windmills off the coast of New Jersey, but I mean that's nothing compared to the wind power that's available in the Great Plains. And places like Texas have benefited greatly from those financial incentives to build windmills. And look, I'm a big advocate of all of the above. I mean, I think you're going to have fossil fuel, you're going to have nuclear, you're going to have windmills and solar power, because there's a great demand for energy. And if you want to keep it, if you don't want it to go up, electricity rates now are going to go up by 20%. in New Jersey this year. If you don't want those prices to keep rising, you need more energy. And you shouldn't cut off and say, okay, we're only going to use oil and gas, we're not going to use renewables, because then you cut off a major source of energy that will reduce your prices. And I think the prices are going to go through the roof once you start cutting off all these other sources of energy like solar and wind.
Well, that's applicable really to electric costs, like down in Ocean County and parts of Monmouth County, I believe. A lot of the homes that are single-family homes that were built down there are electric-based and not, natural gas or whatever. But it is a big concern. But I felt a little bit better knowing that there's some Republicans that are actually starting to push back because they've seen the benefits in their districts. And I'm looking at the $5 million tax credit we're supposed to get back from the solar project. So.
And the funny thing about it is that those are also within our committee, right? Some of them.
Yeah.
So like. That when I mentioned before that the CBO said that, for this $1 trillion, we could maybe get 100 billion, a tenth of it from other things in our committee. Those are the things where they could, and again, the Republicans don't want to do those things either because it affects their districts. I don't know. I wanted to mention one thing. I don't know how much time we have left, but when you were talking about funding, one of the concerns we had is over Amtrak, because as you know, we had a lot of delays in Amtrak last year, and I've been trying to get federal dollars to upgrade the what they call the overhead wires and the signal systems that have been a big part of the problem.
Is it the catenary wire overhead?
Yeah, catenary. I was trying not to use that term because I figured people know what the hell you're talking about, baloney. Yeah. But yes, catenary wires or the overhead wires. And we had 2 grants that are over 100 million to upgrade between New Brunswick and Elizabeth, in the area that I represent. And we're a little, we want to make sure that those get out too. So all these things, you worry about the cuts in these grants and how they affect our daily lives. But hopefully we're going to be able to get, those grants have been approved, and hopefully we'll start getting the money for that.
Well, we're going to close out the show, but before we let you go, Congressman, listen, if you need mayors from across the country to come in and testify before the committees on items like that, before your committee, we can easily line that up. But more importantly, what should the general public be doing right now?
I think the most important thing is to speak out against these Medicaid cuts, because they would be really devastating, and they're totally unjustified in order to pay for, as I say, tax cuts mainly for large corporate interests. And if for somebody, obviously I'm Piscataway. No, you do actually go beyond Piscataway. So if you're living in either Tom Kane or Jeff Andrew or Chris Smith's district, call them up and say, I know you say you're opposed to these Medicaid cuts, but you can't vote for them, because if you do, it's going to be devastating, and it's going to really impact healthcare. But it's not just that calling them, it's just also talking about it on social media, writing letters to the editor, raising public awareness of it, because it really will be devastating to New Jersey and to the country in general. I do think that healthcare is a basic right. I don't want to see people lose their healthcare or have inferior services. So that's, to me, the most important thing right now.
Yeah. Well, Congressman Pallone, I want to thank you for stopping by on Piscataway and all the hard work that you've done throughout the many years representing us down in Washington, D.C. We know your heart's front and center with trying to protect all the residents of the district, but also around the country. And I think it's a breath of fresh air. I don't envy you having to work with some of the colleagues down in Washington dealing with what's going on, but we're in unique times right now, to say the least. And I think we need some sensibility down there in Washington. So I want to thank you for stopping by on Piscataway again.
Thank you, Mayor. I always like to come on the show. Thank you.